The morning sun bathed New York City in golden light as students bustled through the cobbled paths of NYU's Stern School of Business. It was commencement week, a time of celebration, reflection, and anticipation. But this year, the buzz wasn't just about caps and gowns or final exams. The entire campus had been murmuring for weeks about a special speaker invited to deliver a closing address at the Student Leadership Summit. It wasn't a politician. It wasn't a billionaire entrepreneur. It wasn't even a former president. It was Barron Trump. Now 19 years old and a second-year economics major at NYU Stern, Barron had always been an enigmatic presence. Unlike his father, President Donald J. Trump, or even his outspoken siblings, Barron had remained largely private. He rarely gave interviews, rarely posted on social media, and was known to keep a small circle of friends. But this quiet nature had only added to his mystique, and when the student council revealed that Barron had accepted their invitation to speak, the news spread like wildfire. Cameras, reporters, and curious students packed the large auditorium hours before the speech. Even major news networks like CNN, Fox, and MSNBC set up mobile stations nearby. What would Barron say? Would it be political? Would he speak about his father's presidency? Or would he surprise them all? As 6 p.m. neared, the audience fell into a hush. The lights dimmed. The announcer's voice echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Barron Trump." Wearing a simple navy blue suit with no tie, Barron walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. His towering 6 feet 7 inches frame moved with grace, his expression calm but intense. He stood at the podium, looked around the room, then took a deep breath. "Thank you all," he began, his voice deep but gentle. "I've been called many things in my life, a son, a student, a Trump, but today I want to speak to you not as a political figure's child but as a young man shaped by love, sacrifice, and an incredible woman." He paused. The room went quiet. "I want to talk to you about my mother, Melania Trump." Gasps. Whispers. And then silence again. No one expected this. Barron looked down for a moment, his hand trembling slightly as he grasped a small note card. "She doesn't know I'm doing this," he said with a shy grin. "And if she were here, she'd probably tell me to keep it short and not be too emotional. But I think it's time the world sees the side of her that I've been blessed to see." The auditorium was utterly silent, not even the press dared whisper. "My mother has been misunderstood, misrepresented, mocked even. People judged her by her accent, by the designer dresses, by her quiet demeanor. But what they didn't see was the woman who stayed up late reading with me when I couldn't sleep. The woman who taught me how to speak 4 languages before I turned 10. The woman who shielded me from cameras and chaos when our world turned upside down in 2016. Barron's voice cracked slightly. He paused to sip water. His hands now gripped the podium tightly. "I remember one night in the White House," he continued, "when I was overwhelmed, school pressure, the media calling me names, people expecting me to act like someone I wasn't. I sat in my room, tears in my eyes, questioning who I was." He looked up at the crowd, locking eyes with the front row. "She sat beside me for 2 hours, didn't say a word at first, just held my hand. Then she said, 'Barron, you don't have to be like your father, or like me. You just have to be kind, and brave enough to be yourself.'" The audience began to sniffle. A few students wiped away tears. Even some faculty looked stunned. "And I realized then," Barron said, "that my mother wasn't just the First Lady. She was my lighthouse, the calm in every storm." He stepped back from the podium briefly and gestured to a large projection screen. A black and white photo of a young Melania holding baby Barron appeared. She looked elegant, simple, and serene, a stark contrast to the headlines of the past. She gave up her modeling career, her privacy, and her peace. For me, for my father, for America. And I don't think we ever really said thank you. The applause began softly, then louder. Then, suddenly, the entire auditorium was on its feet again. This wasn't a political moment. It was a human one. Barron held up his hand. "But this is just the beginning. There's more I need to say." As the standing ovation subsided and the crowd settled into their seats, Barron Trump leaned back into the mic, his voice now steadier, deeper with conviction. "Most people think silence is weakness," he said. "But I've learned through my mother that silence can also be strength. That grace, elegance, and restraint in a noisy world is a kind of power that most people don't understand. The screen behind him now displayed photos of Melania through the years at charity events, comforting children in hospitals, organizing literacy campaigns, and even candid photos of her reading in the rose garden or walking barefoot on the south lawn. She was never loud, Barron continued. She didn't tweet storms. She didn't chase cameras. But every day she made decisions that impacted lives quietly and lovingly. The crowd was mesmerized. These weren't the usual talking points. This was raw. Real. I remember once in 2018, Barron shared, we were at a school function and a parent came up to her and whispered, "You don't belong here." I was furious. I wanted to say something to defend her. But she smiled at the woman and said, "I belong wherever my son is." And walked away holding my hand. Gasps rippled through the audience. She didn't fight hate with hate. She met it with confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from knowing who you are. He looked over at the crowd of students, many of them first-generation immigrants, LGBTQ+, children of single moms, students juggling work and education, and said, "Many of you know what that feels like. To not belong. To be judged for your background, your name, your story. But my mother taught me that wherever there is love and purpose, you belong. And I want every one of you to hear that." Camera flashes lit up the room. Live streams were exploding with reactions. Social media hashtags like #BarronSpeech and #MelaniaMoment began trending within minutes. He walked slowly across the stage, breaking from the podium. She never asked to be First Lady. She didn't crave attention. She stepped into a role she never imagined, not because she wanted power, but because she believed in supporting her family. Another slide appeared, Melania visiting hurricane victims in Texas. No press around her. Just a simple moment handing water bottles, hugging children. After those visits, Barron added, she'd come home and sit with me and tell me their stories. She didn't talk about politics. She talked about people. Their pain. Their courage. Their hopes. And then he added something that took everyone off guard. She told me once, if you ever have a platform, don't use it to shout about yourself. Use it to lift others. Barron turned back to the mic. That's why I'm here tonight. I didn't come to impress you with tales of the White House or name-drop powerful people. I came to tell you about a woman who was mocked for her accent, her past, and her quietness, but whose spirit has impacted me and now hopefully all of you. More applause. Some students were openly crying now. A girl in the second row whispered to her friend, "I never thought I'd cry because of a Trump." Barron smiled gently, almost as if he heard her. He continued, "There's a side of Melania Trump that never made it into the newspapers. The side that made my breakfast every morning. That kissed my forehead before every test. That sat through countless school plays in the back row, never once asking for special seats. That encouraged me to think for myself, even when it meant questioning everything." He walked back to the podium, adjusting the mic one final time. "I didn't always appreciate her," he admitted, voice soft. "There were years I was distant, angry, embarrassed by the spotlight. But the older I got, the more I saw what she gave up. And what she gave me." There was now a lump in many throats across the auditorium. The student journalists, prepared to scribble notes on political gossip, were now motionless, completely drawn in. "And if she's watching this now," Barron said, staring into the camera, "I just want to say it." He stopped, took a breath, and said softly, "Mom, I'm proud of you. I'm grateful for you. And now the world knows who you really are." The audience erupted again, clapping, whistling, some even chanting, "Melania. Melania," in solidarity. And still, Barron wasn't done. "I want to take you deeper," he said. "Into a conversation that changed my life." The room, still echoing with applause, gradually quieted again as Barron Trump adjusted the mic and spoke with renewed emotion. "This next part is hard," he began, "because it was the first time I saw my mother cry." A few murmurs broke out. Barron had never shared something so personal before, and the audience leaned in, silent and reverent. "It was my first semester at NYU. I just turned 18. I was overwhelmed. Not just with classes, but with everything. My last name wasn't just a name, it was a lightning rod. Some students wouldn't talk to me. Professors made passive jokes in class. I'd see memes about me online. Some of them were cruel." He paused, his jaw clenched slightly, as if reliving the sting. "I called my mom one night and told her I was thinking of transferring. I said I couldn't handle it, that it wasn't fair that people hated me for something I didn't do." And then, on the other end of the line, silence. Barron took a step back, lowering his voice. Then she said, "Come home this weekend. That's all. No lecture. No anger. Just come home." So I did. The screen behind him flickered again, a simple photo of the White House private residence kitchen. No crowds. No staff. Just a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a pot of tea. She sat me down, Barron said, and looked me in the eyes. And I'll never forget what she said. He now looked directly at the audience, his voice barely above a whisper. Barron, life will not always be fair. People will judge you without knowing you. They will say things to hurt you, to test you. But you cannot let the world turn your heart hard. He swallowed. Then she added, and this is what broke me, she said, I've cried too, Barron. Alone. In rooms you'll never see. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered that my job is not to be liked. My job is to love and raise a good man. The audience was dead silent now. Some wiped their eyes. Even hardened reporters covering the event had their pens resting in their laps. I cried in her arms that night, Barron said, his voice trembling again. For the first time in years. And I knew in that moment I couldn't walk away. From school. From challenges. From my story. Because my mother hadn't walked away. Not once. He paused, glancing up at the lights above. I stayed at NYU. I pushed through. And every time things got hard, I'd read the letter she slipped into my backpack that weekend. Just 4 lines, handwritten in her soft cursive. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper aged with creases from wear. I've never shared this before, he said. But tonight I will. He read slowly. Be strong when you feel weak. Be gentle when the world is harsh. Speak only when your words bring light. And walk proudly, for you are mine. Gasps echoed throughout the auditorium. A few students covered their mouths. One professor clapped slowly, then the rest followed, turning the moment into another standing ovation, not just for Barron, but for Melania Trump's quiet power. Barron tucked the note away, almost like returning a treasure to a vault. I used to think being a Trump meant I had to live up to something big, he said, his voice more certain now. But my mother made me realize being a Trump means living up to someone small. Someone humble. Someone human. Like her. The screen changed again, this time showing a candid shot of Melania sitting in a garden in Slovenia, her birthplace, wearing jeans and no makeup, smiling at the camera. My mother never forgot where she came from, Barron said. And she never let me forget where we all begin as children, dreaming, hurting, hoping. And how we treat others in that space defines who we really are. Now many in the crowd were visibly moved. Even those who came expecting a generic speech about leadership found themselves witnessing something far deeper, a soul laid bare. Barron looked over the crowd once more and said, but there's one final gift she gave me. A challenge, actually. One that I carry every day. And tonight I'll share it with you. Barron Trump's voice was calm now, grounded in a purpose that extended beyond the auditorium walls. He moved closer to the center of the stage, no notes, no teleprompter, just memory and heart. I was 17 when she gave me the challenge, he said. We were in the Rose Garden. I just found out I got accepted into NYU. I was so excited. But she looked at me very still and said, your journey doesn't begin at college, Barron. It begins the moment you decide who you're going to be when no one's watching. He turned toward the screen again. A photo now appeared, Melania planting a tree beside a child at a hospital garden in Maryland, unnoticed by the press. Just a small act. A seed. That's who my mother is, Barron said. Someone who planted kindness like trees. Quietly. Never asking for applause. She believed in legacy not as something people write in books, but in how you treat the person standing in front of you. He paused. You see, she grew up in a small town in Slovenia, surrounded by modesty, by humility, by dignity. No cameras. No red carpets. Just a deep belief that hard work, grace, and loyalty mattered more than attention. The room grew more reflective. Every eye was on Barron. And when she came to America, he continued, she brought that with her. She never let money or power erase the girl who walked barefoot through meadows, who stayed up late studying English by candlelight, who told me stories of how she used to dream of standing in New York City, not to shop or model, but just to belong. A moment of silence fell. Then Barron said something that silenced even the sounds of shifting seats. She still sends money back to her childhood village. Quietly. Monthly. No headlines. No charity galas. Just help. Gasps rippled again. Many in the room were visibly touched. My mother challenged me, and now I challenge all of you, Barron said. What if we all lived lives that didn't need to be broadcast to matter? What if kindness done in secret was more powerful than fame gained in public? He looked out across the faces, students, faculty, reporters, then held his arms slightly open. Imagine what this generation could become if we stopped chasing virality and started chasing value. Real value, compassion, patience, forgiveness, curiosity. He took a long breath. I don't care what political party you belong to. I don't care what your background is. If you hear nothing else tonight, hear this, be better than the noise. Be like her. Then, softer. She doesn't know I'm saying any of this. I didn't tell her I'd be giving this speech. She probably thinks I'm just presenting a paper on market trends. He chuckled gently, and so did the crowd. But I knew this was the moment, he said. Because the world sees presidents and headlines. But I see her. The woman who made me tea when I was sick. The woman who walked the halls of the White House at midnight to check if I was sleeping. The woman who told me you are more than your name. He let that sink in. She's not perfect. None of us are. But she has lived a life that taught me the power of being underestimated. And the strength of showing up day after day for the people you love even when it's hard. The lights dimmed briefly. Another final image appeared, Melania hugging a young girl in a wheelchair during a hospital visit. The girl's face lit up in wonder. Melania's smile was soft, sincere. No photographers in sight. Just presence. That's the real legacy she gave me, Barron said. Not the fashion, not the title, not the mansion or motorcades. It's that girl in the chair. The look in her eyes. That's what matters. And then, with a tear trailing down his cheek, he said, "And now, I want to pay that forward. In my own way." The crowd was still. Some with tears drying, others with pens forgotten, still clenched in hand. Barron Trump, once an enigma to most Americans, now stood before them not as a symbol or surname, but simply as a son, humbled, shaped, and inspired by his mother. He exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the room one last time. "I've been asked many times," he began, "what I plan to do after college. Will I go into business, politics, media? But the truth is, I want to build something bigger than a career." He paused, lifting his chin, a new fire in his eyes. "I want to build a culture." That line hit like a wave. "A culture," he explained, "where children of powerful people don't feel invincible but responsible. A culture where fame is used not to separate, but to lift. A culture where young men like me stop hiding behind last names and start honoring the people who raised us." The audience began nodding. A few students clapped. Slowly, then more joined, until it swelled into something almost reverent. Barron continued, "My mother taught me that dignity isn't loud. It doesn't shout in anger or retaliate when misunderstood. Dignity listens. It steadies itself in storms. It walks away from cheap applause in search of meaningful silence." Then, looking straight at the students, "So here's my promise. One day, when I have a family of my own, I'll tell them about her. About the first lady who didn't crave attention, but who changed lives behind closed doors. I'll tell them how she let her silence speak louder than scandals. How she taught her son to pause, to reflect, to think before speaking. Something rare in our world." He smiled gently, voice thick with emotion now. "And if I can raise my children with even a fraction of her steadiness, then I'll know I've made her proud." The screen behind him faded to black. No more photos. Just the words. "Be better than the noise." Melania Trump. Barron turned toward it and nodded. "I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. I still mess up," he admitted. "But I know this much: if my mother, an immigrant who barely spoke English at first, could walk with grace through some of the most brutal headlines on earth, then I can show up for people in smaller ways. Every day. With intention. With empathy." He stepped away from the mic for a moment, then returned, his final words calm and clear. "To every mother out there who feels unseen, and to every child out there wondering if they're enough, let me say this: you matter. Your quiet strength matters. Your love matters. And sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't speak but is always listening." He gave a small bow, not showy, just sincere. As he walked off the stage, the crowd stood again. But this time, the applause wasn't wild. It wasn't chaotic. It was steady. A soft thunder of gratitude. Outside, the speech would go viral. Not because Barron Trump shouted. Not because he stirred political debate. But because, in a world addicted to noise, he had chosen humility. By the next morning, headlines read, "Newspaper: Barron Trump silences the world with love." Newspaper: A first son, a first lady, and a quiet revolution at NYU Stern. Newspaper: From the shadows of power, a son honors his mother's light. Melania, watching from home in quiet disbelief, would tear up not for the fame, but for the truth finally spoken. And Barron? He would return to class the next day like everyone else, hoodie on, books in hand, head down. But around him, things had shifted. Not in the way of celebrity. Not in politics. In hearts. Because his words, his mother's legacy, had planted something rare. Hope.